Now, we're in a chapter now dealing with financial statement analysis. And this is how you systematically go on about seeing what the strengths and the weaknesses of the company are. And as you've learned from the lectures, there are different types of ratios that you go through. There's liquidity, leverage, activity, profitability, and investment-based ratios. In this problem now, they're giving us the income statement and the balance sheet for Berry Computing. And they're giving us the industry averages for that company. And they want us to calculate the financial ratios. Now, I'm going to go through this, by type of ratio. So the first set of ratios we're going to look at now, these are liquidity ratios. And you should recall that liquidity ratios measure the firm's ability to meet its short-term indebtedness. And the short-term debt of a company is the current liabilities. In liquidation now, a company would liquidate its current assets to pay its current liabilities. So what you'll see with liquidity ratios, they all have current assets and current liabilities in them. Now the first liquidity ratio that we're going to look at for Berry Computing is probably the best known liquidity ratio. And this is the current ratio. It's defined as current assets divided by current liabilities. If you go to the balance sheet, you look in the assets section of the balance sheet, you find current assets for Berry Computing to be $655,000. If you go to the liabilities section of the balance sheet, you'll find current liabilities to be $330,000. If you do the math, you get a current ratio for Berry Computing of 1.98. Note that the industry average is 2. That's the same thing, really. And the way you would interpret this is that the current ratio is telling us, is indicating that Berry Computing's ability to meet its short-term indebtedness is in line with that of the typical firm in the industry. The other liquidity ratio that we're going to look at for Berry Computing is the quick ratio. And sometimes the quick ratio, by the way, is referred to as the acid test ratio. Your author likes quick ratio best, and that's fine. But the quick ratio, or acid test ratio now, that's defined as current assets minus inventory divided by current liabilities. The numerator, we take out inventory. The reason we do that is that this is a more stringent measure of liquidity. The quick ratio removes from the numerator the least liquid current asset, which is inventory. In bankruptcy, in liquidation, you get very little for inventory. So removing it leaves you with your most liquid current assets. Hence, the quick ratio is a more stringent measure of liquidity. So if you go to the balance sheet for Berry Computing now, you'll find current assets to be $655,000. You'll find inventory to be $241,500. And current liabilities, $330,000. That gives Berry Computing a quick ratio of 1.25. The industry average they report is 1.3. Again, at this point, I consider that to be basically the same thing. I would conclude that based on the quick ratio, Berry Computing's ability to meet its short-term indebtedness is in line with that of the typical firm in the industry.